when we're talking to product folks, whether they're launching a new product or refreshing an old product, we never start with price. Pricing's at the table from the beginning, but we always start with value.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
It's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the healthy relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today is the 7th episode of our season of Pricing Executives, where we're learning how pricing executives think. Today, our guest is Jose Morabito. Here are 3 things you want to know about Jose before we start. He spent 15 years with American Express climbing the ladder between 2 different roles, finance and revenue management. He spent a couple of years as VP of Finance at ADP. He's now VP of Strategic Pricing with Quest Diagnostics. And I got to throw in a 4th one because I just learned it. He used to paraglide. Love that. Welcome, Jose.
Thank you, Mark. Nice to be here.
Hey, I don't even know how you're going to answer this question, but how did you get into pricing?
Dumb luck, as a matter of fact. So I was a finance manager at the American Express Latin America headquarters in Miami Lakes. In early 2001, American Express was building their international pricing team. And at the same time, the finance organization was going through a restructuring. So I actually lost my job in finance, was displaced. There were 3 finance managers, one in Latin America, one in Europe, and one in Asia. And they consolidated those 3 roles into 2, and they moved them to London. So I was effectively out of a job, but at the same time, they were staffing up the brand new pricing team in the region. And I applied, and that's how I got into it.
Nice. And so I'm always curious how people define revenue management, because you're using the word pricing almost synonymously with revenue management. Is that true?
Yes, I would say that that's true.
Okay. And so what does revenue management mean?
I think it means different things in different cases, right? At American Express, revenue management and pricing were interconnected. The team initially was named Pricing and Value. To your point earlier in the introduction, pricing, value, and the relationship between the 2. Eventually, they changed the name to the revenue management function. In a company like Quest Diagnostics, where I am today, revenue management is more around the billing aspect, right? So how do you collect the cash and how do you manage that function? So it's a little bit more back office, operational than pricing. That's how I view it. Yeah,
and I think in a lot of companies, especially hotel, airline, they think of revenue management a lot like yield management, right? Because I only have so much inventory. Where manufacturing companies where we manufacture products and we can make more. I love the Doritos commercial, Jay Leno, we can make more.
Right.
Then I think it's more pricing and value than revenue management in that perspective. So I'm always curious how
I would agree. Yep.
And so you hopped back and forth between pricing and finance. What made you keep jumping back and forth? What made you come back to pricing, and what made you leave pricing?
Once I became a VP at American Express, I would say that my career was largely out of my hands. They have a very strong talent management function, or at least they did. I've been out of there for 7 years, where VPs that were doing well were picked up and moved, right? There was an FLT, finance leadership team leader over there. There are actually 2 of them that I got along really well with, Alan Gallo and Paul Huff. They both kept taking me into their teams, taking turns, right? I would do 2 years under Paul, 2 years under Alan, 2 years under Paul, et cetera. That's how I ended up moving between finance and pricing. Paul typically led the pricing area, and Alan more of the finance area at the time.
Nice.
And then, I ended up here. I don't know if you're going to ask me about how I ended up at Quest in a pricing role, but I can talk about that too later if you like.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, I always enjoyed the pricing work much more than finance. I enjoyed both, but pricing was always more fun. When Quest was recruiting for the head of pricing role, I felt that I really needed to give it a shot because I had never led a company-wide pricing team. I've led, regional pricing teams, and I've led divisional pricing teams, but never, company-wide pricing teams. And I felt like I was ready, and I needed to give it a shot, and I would choose a pricing role over a finance role any day.
So I have it's probably a biased opinion, but I have an opinion about how I think finance people think about pricing. So can you tell us, don't put your pricing hat on, put your finance hat on. What do finance people think about pricing?
I would say that finance folks are first and foremost most concerned with, adding value to the shareholders, right? Profitability. And they will make pricing decisions mostly based on shareholder returns.
Okay. So I don't think that's horrible. In my mind,
Nope.
I get the feeling that finance people want, because of a risk aversion, and they want to protect the company, they focus a lot more on cost plus pricing than trying to figure out what customers are willing to pay. Would that be accurate, inaccurate?
I would say it would be accurate in some companies. My experience has been in companies where finance leads the pricing group. Yes, they are doing more cost plus approach. But over time, as the maturity of the pricing function within the company improves and increases, they will tend to gravitate towards a more value-based approach, even if they are under the finance umbrella.
Yeah, I'd love to learn the magic words you could say to CFOs that are doing cost plus pricing that's the wrong thing to do. If you know those, share them with me, would you please?
Yeah.
So let's talk about, first off, let's talk about your mentors. You talked about two people that kept pulling you back and forth. Were they your mentors, and what did they mentor you on?
One of them was, I would say Paul was one of my mentors. He always mentored me to think long-term. One thing Paul always told me was, don't think about the next job. Think about how the next job is going to get you ready for the job after that. Right. So that was always interesting to me. And I think, he said that to me the first time when they were trying to put me in a job that I didn't want. But then I saw that how valuable that was, and he reinforced that time and time again. I had another mentor who was not my boss. She was my business partner in one of my, actually in that first pricing role, Doria Camaraza. She led the merchant division for Latin America for American Express. And then she and I got to work together again when I was a finance VP in the Fort Lauderdale Service Center. She was a center head of the call center there. And she always, her mentoring me was always around encouraging me and praising me whenever I told her something that she needed to hear, but she didn't want to hear. Right. So she always said, have the courage to tell people, regardless of the level and your level, things that they need to hear to make a better business decision. Don't just tell them what they want to hear, because some of these senior leaders will always want to hear what they want to hear, and they will value hearing things that they need to hear, even if they don't necessarily agree with it.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic life lesson.
Yep.
And so did you seek out mentors, or did they kind of fall in your lap?
They fell in my lap, I would say. I never really sought them. These were folks that I had worked either for or with, and I had done a good job, and I had made them look good, and they saw something in me that they wanted to help develop and help me flourish.
Nice.
So, yep.
So let's talk about, it doesn't have to be your current team, but any pricing team that you've worked with or thought about or coached. First off, what are the skills that you think make up a really good pricing professional?
That's a good question. I would say that the ability to think like a general manager is key in making a good pricing person, right? When you think about the constituencies or the constituents in any company, right? You typically have at least three. Most companies have three, right? They'll have a shareholder, they'll have a customer, and they'll have an employee, right? And depending on the role that you're in, your job is to look after one of those three constituents, right? So if you're in, say, marketing or sales, you're looking after the customer or the client. If you're in finance, you look after the shareholder. If you're in human resources, you're looking after the employee. And whenever a tough decision needs to be made, it's typically the GM that's the one that's overlooking all three of those, right? And they're the ones that are going to be making that decision. I think a good pricing person needs to have the ability to think like a GM and see and understand and weigh the impacts to the three constituents when making a decision.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. I often recommend that people go out and talk and learn from everybody else in the company. What are their roles? What are their goals? And how can we help them achieve their goals with the decisions that we make and the things that we do?
Yep.
And I hadn't thought of it the way you just said it, where it's across those three constituencies. I often think of it more of, I've got salespeople pulling me this way. I've got product managers or product people pulling me this way. And how do I keep everybody balanced? But adding in the shareholder and the employee side probably makes a lot of sense, probably especially the shareholder side for pricing people.
Yep.
Yeah. So what do you think about soft skills versus technical ability, knowledge of data?
I think your expertise in technical skills will be more important when you are in the lower levels of the organization, when you're the ones that's rolling up your sleeves and getting into the data. However, I think the more senior folks need to understand how that data is structured and how it works so you can ask the right questions and provide thought leadership to the team, right? On the soft skills side, it's more critical to have them the more you grow and the higher you go up the ladder, right? Where you're more focused on influencing and you have to frame things up correctly, influence people to move in different directions. I see it as a pendulum, right? The lower you are, the more important the technical skills are, and then as you climb, those technical skills become less important, and the soft skills become more important.
Yeah, I think I would buy that. Let me throw in pricing expertise, or maybe it's reputation for pricing expertise, because when you say something, you want people to believe you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that probably fits. That has to grow as your soft skills grow, as you grow up in the career.
Agreed. Whenever you can influence somebody by saying, I had this experience in the past and we did something like this and here's how it succeeded or failed, I think it adds a lot of credibility to what you're saying, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, describe to me the person that you're going to promote next.
Oh boy. It's a really tough question because I think it depends on opportunity. But the person who's ready to be promoted is somebody who has already been performing at that next level, right? It's somebody who is lower risk of failing, if you will, right? Somebody who's performing, if you're a manager, somebody's performing at the director levels. If you're a director, somebody's already performing at the VP level where you're giving them very little guidance and oversight and direction, and they're essentially putting things in front of you and you're agreeing to everything they're saying, right? That's the person that's going to get promoted. If somebody's putting stuff in front of me and I'm always questioning what they're doing or asking them to do things differently or look at it a different way, they may not be ready to be promoted yet.
Yeah, and actually that's a really interesting question. How do you decide if I should question what you say or just say yes and go do what you say? Because if I think it's not the right thing, you want me to question it, I assume.
Well, I think it goes back to, the advice that Doria gave me, right? Tell people what they need to hear, right? If I'm asking you to do something and you're questioning it, it's either because you don't understand it or you don't agree, right? And I would certainly hope that you felt comfortable enough to have that discussion with me and either get me to clear it up or help convince me that my way is not the right way. So I would welcome that and actually encourage it at every single level in my organization to question what your leaders are doing.
One of my favorite sayings that I heard, and I think it's Intel that adopted this or where I first heard it, and that was disagree, then commit. And in other words, let's have a big discussion, let's debate, and then once we've made the decision, I'm 100% behind it. Doesn't matter which decision was made.
That's right. And if you are not agreeing to the decision early on and then agree at the end to support it, that agreement is the only thing that people outside of that room need to hear, right?
Yes. Yeah, we don't need to go badmouth people. Nice.
Yep.
So
Right.
how do you decide when to go push against a constraint? I often call this pushing walls, right? Push against a constraint. Think of it as changing a process versus just saying, yep, I'm going to adopt that. I accept it. That's the way it's going to be. I'm not going to change that. So that's a really hard decision.
It is. And I would say that how hard I push depends on what's the prize at the end, right? So if it's something inconsequential or has very little impact to the business or to the bottom line, I may not push as hard, right? But if it's something that I truly think is transformational in nature and it's going to significantly improve something, even if it's a harder push and a harder thing to accomplish, I will push harder on those things.
Yeah, and certainly that makes sense. It's your decision or your thought process that says this is really impactful. It's worth my time, energy, effort. What do you think about your people who do that? Should they be pushing as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. I keep telling some of the newer folks on the team at the lower levels that, we're not order takers, right? We're not here to take an order from a commercial person that says, hey, my client wants this, give it to me, right? They, that's not what we do, right? We try to do what's right for, again, the three constituents: the customer, the shareholder, and the employee. And if you don't agree with what the commercial person is asking, absolutely push and come to a consensus, come to an agreement that is good for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. I found that really hard in my career to figure out when to push and when not to push. It is hard. And I guess my advice, and correct me if you don't disagree, but my advice is to first say, yes, I agree with you, and then think really hard if I'm going to push against a constraint. Make a conscious decision that says, I'm going to push back on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree in the sense that I would never say no right off the bat, right? So I don't necessarily always say yes right off the bat and then push. I may ask for time to think about it
Yeah.
if they're coming to me, But I would agree with your point there that yes is a good place to start, and then push later. Certainly, don't ever start with a no.
Yeah. One of my big lessons that I learned way too late in life was look for areas of agreement instead of areas of disagreements.
That's how you build relationships.
Isn't it though?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some pricing lessons that you wish more people knew? More people inside your company, outside your company?
Um, I would. That's a tough question. I want people to know that we pricing are an enabler to the business, right? We're not a barrier. Some people they hear the word pricing, they have a revulsion, right? They're like, hey, they're the cops. They're trying to make my job harder. No, we're trying to make your job easier. We're trying to make more money for the company, better solutions for the customers, and better life for the employees. So I would say that that's number one. Number two is we're not always out to raise price, right? Sometimes we recognize when the price value equation is not in balance that we need to lower price, right? So there's
Yeah.
just some misconceptions out there around pricing that I think people need to hear.
Yeah. I'm a little, I'm more than a little curious. I'm actually very curious about value versus pricing in the following sense. I get the feeling a lot of pricing people think it's, I'm watching the numbers, I'm figuring out what the right price is. Maybe I'm crunching some new reports, but it also feels like most people in the business don't understand what value means. And so how much time do we as pricing spend educating product people, salespeople about what value actually means and how we achieve higher prices?
So the way we do it currently, when we're talking to product folks, whether they're launching a new product or refreshing an old product, we never start with price. Pricing's at the table from the beginning, but we always start with value, right? What's the value to the customer from ordering this particular product versus either the competitive product or the product it's replacing? Why are they better off? What's the benefit? And we don't move to the price discussion until everybody's clear on what that value component is, right? What the benefit is of that new product. A lot of times the product people will say, hey, we're launching this new product. We need to know what the price is so that we can model, the outcomes and get it approved. And, that's not the right place to start. So we always start with value.
That is absolutely a brilliant answer. Out of curiosity, and are you able to tell me, did Amex or ADP do the exact same thing, or was it a different perspective?
Amex certainly did. ADP was more of a cost plus approach. But Amex certainly was, I would say, a pioneer in the value-based pricing arena, going back to 1999, 2000, you're going back 20 years and they were doing, value-based pricing already. Yeah, that's where I cut my teeth in value-based pricing.
Nice.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap up, but the final question that I always ask, what's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Understand what the value is of your product, how that's differentiated versus your competitor, and make the hard decision on whether you're going to be the premium price provider in the market, the low price provider in the market, or somewhere in the middle.
Fabulous.
Once you come to grips with where you want to be, once you come to grips with where you want to be, you're going to have a better time at it.
Yeah, and then you can, it helps you make your decisions. So perfect.
Absolutely. Yep.
Perfect. Jose, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
I am on LinkedIn, Jose Morabito, Morabito. I think I'm the only one there, so it should be pretty easy to find.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I
That
appreciate it.
Great. That was great. Episode 87 is all done. This is the time where I ask you to please leave us a review. These are very, very valuable to us, and I promise I'll read them as well. The most recent review titled Great Interviewing and Great Guests. If you're keen to hear how pricing is done by the best in the business, I highly recommend Mark's podcast, An Expert Interviewing Experts. A great use of your time. I like that phrase. Thank you, Go Mordecai, on Apple Podcasts. Really appreciate that. Also, feel free to join our community at Champions of Value. You can go to community.championsofvalue.com. There you'll find everything that I publish for free. The memes, the blogs, the videos, the podcasts, everything is linked to there. Of course, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see some of those things, but just because of LinkedIn algorithms, you don't end up seeing everything. Join me at community.cov.com. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.